Arthur stepped into the chilly air of the hallway, feeling the weight of his responsibilities settle back onto his shoulders as he prepared to face the day. He briefly checked that everything was in place. Dawn's ballad and Udo's horns securely stored in his dimension ring, his appearance as composed as he could manage under the circumstances. The unfamiliar woman who had come to escort him was waiting just outside, her posture respectful but clearly ready to lead him to the meeting hall. Arthur gave her a nod, signaling he was ready, and they started down the corridor together. The castle was unusually quiet, the usual hum of activity subdued, perhaps out of respect for the gravity of the current situation or the early hour. As they walked, Arthur's mind was a flurry of thoughts. Sylvie's condition in the medical ward was a constant worry at the back of his mind, though the skilled healers of the castle gave him hope. Micah's situation was another concern. Despite her willingness to return without a fight, her fate was uncertain, and Arthur felt a twinge of guilt. She had been a comrade, after all. Reaching the meeting hall, Arthur found several key figures already gathered. Veray and Byron were deep in discussion with a couple of the dwarven lances, their expressions serious. A map was spread out on the table, likely detailing strategic locations and troop movements. Radaeus and Udo's current statuses as prisoners were sure to be key topics of today's meetings. Arthur took his place at the table, his scars hidden, but their pain still lingering beneath the surface. As the discussions began, his focus shifted fully to the matters at hand. Each decision made here could alter the course of the war, and he was acutely aware of the heavy burden each choice carried. The meeting would cover the interrogation plans for Radaeus and Uto, strategies for dealing with the traitors, and the integration of the new intelligence they had gathered. Arthur knew that his insights would be crucial, not just as a leader, but as someone who had faced these enemies on the battlefield. As the conversation flowed around him, Arthur's thoughts occasionally drifted to Sylvie and her recovery, hoping she would be back at his side soon. He also pondered over Saris Vritra's cryptic advice and what powers he might be able to unlock from Udo's horns. These were not just remnants of a foe, but potentially valuable resources that could tip the scales in their favor. The weight of leadership was heavy, but Arthur was not alone. As he looked around the room at the determined faces of his allies, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they would navigate the complexities of war, betrayal, and alliance. And with each decision, Arthur hoped to steer them closer to a future where peace was possible, not just a fleeting dream. As the circular table filled, King Glader, the typically boisterous ruler, didn't waste any time showing his frustration about the missing artifact under Lord Aldir's watch. The discussion quickly escalated into a debate about priorities and strategies, but it was clear that everyone's nerves were frayed. When it came time for Arthur to share his recent experiences, all eyes turned to him. He recounted the details of his mission with Ulfred and Micah, carefully navigating through the events while selectively leaving out certain facts about the battle with Udo. Arthur explained how he and Sylvie managed to turn the tables on Udo, focusing on the Vritra's horns, a detail he fabricated for added credibility, inspired by a late comrade's past encounter. The revelation about the horns sparked interest, particularly from Variore, who questioned the tactic. Arthur's response was tactful, acknowledging his uncertainty about the effectiveness of such a strategy. His story, although not entirely truthful, seemed to satisfy the council for the moment. As the meeting progressed, Queen Priscilla shifted the discussion to the crucial topic of the alliance with the dwarves. With Radaeus out of the picture and under wraps, the council debated how to manage the dwarven relations without causing further unrest. Arthur listened intently, chiming in with strategic questions that steered the conversation towards leveraging Radaeus's undisclosed capture. Virion, seeing the potential in Arthur's suggestion to maintain the illusion of royal freedom for strategic communications, praised his foresight. The plan evolved into a deceptive strategy to continue issuing orders in Radaeus's name, aiming to gather intelligence and subtly influence dwarf affairs without direct confrontation. As the meeting concluded, the mood had shifted from tension to a cautious optimism. With Arthur at the center of the strategizing, proving once again his value not just on the battlefield, but also in the war room. The council adjourned with plans to refine their new approach, leaving Arthur to ponder the weight of his contributions and the secrets he chose to keep. Arthur's involvement in the council discussions intensified as they addressed the aftermath of recent skirmishes and the ongoing concerns about their supply lines. With General Micah's questioning pending and Udo's interrogation planned, Virion took the lead, emphasizing the importance of gleaning information from Radius to secure the dwarves' cooperation, a critical element in their struggle. As they delved into the logistics of ensuring safer and more efficient supply routes to the front lines, the mood in the room took a slight turn towards optimism. Discussions of possibly using underground routes and enhancing security measures at key points like Black Bend City illustrated their proactive approach to countering enemy tactics. Arthur's thoughts briefly wandered to his parents, who were actively participating in the war effort, which added a personal stake to the efficacy of these plans. Arthur's proposal to utilize dwarven metal mages in conjunction with elven nature magic to safeguard the supply lines showcased his strategic thinking. He sought to blend different magical disciplines to create a robust defense mechanism that would not only protect the supplies, but also the people transporting them, including his parents. As the meeting wrapped up, Virion acknowledged Arthur's recent achievements and contributions. The recognition of his valor and tactical acumen came with an offer of rewards. Arthur saw this as an opportunity, not just for personal gain, but to further his capabilities to contribute more effectively to the war effort. His request for a brief respite from frontline missions to focus on training was granted, albeit reluctantly by Virion, who understood the need but was visibly concerned about the timing. Arthur's decision to stay back and attend council meetings, while initially seeming burdensome, was driven by his desire to use this time to study and potentially harness the power of the artifacts they had collected, specifically Udo's horns. His forward-thinking approach was to prepare himself for the increasingly complex challenges they faced as the war progressed. The meeting's conclusion brought a lighter, more personal moment as Arthur decided to visit his sister. It has Ellie. His playful attempt to scare her with a ghostly impersonation backfired amusingly, leading to a humorous yet warm reunion. Despite the undercurrents of war and strategy, this interaction with Ellie and Boo, her mana beast, highlighted the enduring bonds of family and camaraderie that sustained Arthur amid the trials of leadership and battle. This blend of strategic planning and personal interactions underscored the complex layering of Arthur's responsibilities and relationships, illustrating the multifaceted nature of his role in the war and within his family. The narrative continued to weave these elements together, reflecting the broad spectrum of challenges Arthur faced as he navigated his duties as a general, a brother, and a son. Arthur watched Ellie with a mix of pride and nostalgia, reflecting on his own early days of training as she unleashed mana arrows into the distant targets. The thud of each successful hit was a sweet reminder of progress, a notion that brought him comfort in these uncertain times. As the siblings spent their morning in the fields adjacent to the castle, Arthur was mindful of the balance he needed to strike between encouraging Ellie's ambitions and protecting her from the harsh realities of their world. The casual chatter and laughter shared between them belied the gravity of their family's involvement in the ongoing conflict. Ellie's determination was evident not just in her precise archery, but in her independent spirit. Despite being popular among her peers, she found little interest in typical conversations about trivial matters, instead focusing her attention on mastering her skills. This dedication, while admirable, hinted at the sacrifices she was making in her personal life, sacrifices that Arthur knew all too well. The conversation took a turn when Ellie expressed her desire to attend a magic academy, a path that would undoubtedly lead her away from the safety of the castle and into a broader world filled with both wonder and danger. Arthur's promise to discuss the possibility with their parents was met with an excitement that reminded him of the responsibilities he held not just as a general, but as a brother. Ellie's hug, full of gratitude and hope, was a stark contrast to the solitude of Arthur's own journey. Her ambition to prove herself beyond the castle walls resonated with his own past, yet his protective instincts urged caution. The world outside was not as forgiving as the training grounds they stood on. As Ellie resumed her practice, Arthur's thoughts were momentarily interrupted by Sylvie's teasing remark about his paternal instincts. The comment, though playful, sparked a deeper reflection within Arthur about the future and what legacy he hoped to leave behind. The idea of family, of continuity, and of lessons passed down through generations suddenly seemed more poignant against the backdrop of war. The day continued with the rhythmic sounds of Ellie's arrows piercing the air, each shot a mix of magic and determination. Arthur knew that her journey was just beginning, and his role in guiding her was more crucial than ever. As they wrapped up their session, the laughter and banter faded into a contemplative silence, each lost in their thoughts about the paths they would choose and the battles they would face. Back at the castle, as Ellie cleaned her bow and Arthur helped Sylvie to her resting spot, the weight of their conversation lingered. Decisions about Ellie's future, the safety of their parents, and the ongoing war were omnipresent. But in those fleeting moments of sibling bonding, the complexities of life seemed manageable, framed by the simple joys of togetherness and the quiet hope for a peaceful tomorrow. Arthur grumbled in his mind, telling himself to go back to sleep as he watched Ellie practice her archery. She moved with a grace that made her actions look almost like a dance, forming translucent arrows between her fingers, skipping chance for the arrows she knew best. Boo, the ever-stalwart companion, somehow managed to snooze through it all on her back. Suddenly, a voice called out, "General Arthur?" Startled, Arthur turned to find an elf with a clipboard, dressed in what looked like a lab coat from another world. The elf's eyes were a stunning mix of pink and blue, and she gave a respectful bow, introducing herself as Alanis Emeria, his new attendant assigned by Commander Virion. As Arthur acknowledged her with a nod, his sister, standing nearby with her bow now slung over her shoulder, asked if he was heading out. Confirming, Arthur mentioned he had a meeting with an old friend, Artificer Gideon, and told her not to wait up for dinner. With a brief exchange of messages with Sylvie, his other companion, about staying back with Eleanor, Arthur followed Alanis. On their way, Gideon burst onto the scene, a flurry of excitement and sweat, eager to hear Arthur's latest idea. Once inside a meeting room, the discussion turned to the potential uses of a new fuel source, combustium, which Gideon had proudly named. Arthur, however, had other plans for combustium, a landship, or as he preferred to call it, a train. Gideon, ever the enthusiast, quickly caught on to the concept, despite his initial amusement at the name. The two dove into the technicalities of railway systems, mapping out routes that could revolutionize transportation and potentially lead to the creation of new cities independent of existing teleportation gate locations. Arthur's idea seemed to pave the way for a new era, changing the strategic layout of the kingdoms. As the hours passed and the plans took shape, Arthur's hunger reminded him of the time. He opted to find food himself rather than trouble the chef, brushing off Alanis's offer to arrange a meal. Before leaving, Gideon mentioned that Emily had been working on new artifacts that needed testing, playfully suggesting Arthur as the perfect candidate. Arthur left the room with a promise to check in on Gideon's progress and a playful remark about his new role as a test subject for potentially groundbreaking artifacts. As he walked away, he could hear Gideon muttering about how far the kid had come, a smile hidden in his voice. Arthur's evening settled into a curious mix of relaxation and anticipation. After a fulfilling meal and dismissing his training attendant Alanis, he retrieved his bond, Sylvie, from Ellie and retreated to the safety of his room. "Ready for what I've got to show you?" Arthur asked Sylvie, who had been waiting on the bed. He had just finished a shower, and curiosity brightened Sylvie's eyes in her fox form. "What's got you all excited?" Sylvie responded, her tone eager yet playful as she shifted restlessly. Arthur had a challenge keeping his exciting news secret, especially with Sylvie's keen senses. To keep her from guessing, he filled his mind with random numbers and thoughts as they returned to his room. Once safely inside, he activated earth and wind perception spells for privacy and finally, with a flourish, pulled out 2 obsidian horns from his magical ring. Sylvie's eyes widened at the sight of the black, glossy horns, remnants of their recent battle. Don't tell me. Exactly, Arthur burst out with enthusiasm. They're Udo's horns. But why? Sylvie's confusion was apparent. Arthur realized Sylvie hadn't caught the full tale due to her earlier predicament in the battle. He quickly recounted the events post her knockout, the dangers they faced, and the dramatic intervention by Ceres. Listening intently, Sylvie's expressions danced between awe and concern. It's frightening to think we were so close to death, she remarked, her gaze lingering on the horns. I know, Arthur agreed. Without Ceres, we wouldn't have stood a chance against Udo. Sylvie nodded, her attention returning to the horns. And you think these horns hold a lot of mana? Exactly. Though it's a risk, considering our situation with the Asuras and Ceres's intentions, I think it's one worth taking, Arthur explained. Sylvie pawed at one horn, contemplative. If they boost your strength to the white core level, that'd be a huge advantage for us. Arthur picked up one horn, leaving the other for Sylvie. This one's for me. You take the other. Your body's still adapting from the awakening process Lord Indrath started. Absorbing the mana from this horn should help. Sylvie hesitated, voicing her fears of fully awakening as an Asura and the implications it might have for their partnership. Arthur reassured her, touching her gently, reminding her of her concealed nature and the protections her mother had put in place. We'll face whatever comes, Arthur said, encouraging her. We always do. With a mutual nod, they began their attempt to extract the mana. Arthur probed the horn with his mana, but unlike elixirs, the horn showed no immediate reaction. Time passed, with little to no sign of the mana within. Just as Arthur began to doubt, an overwhelming force suddenly pulled at his mind, dragging his consciousness into a realm of darkness. He tried to calm himself, reminded that his physical body was safe, but the vulnerability of his mental state was terrifying. Arthur felt his existence merge with something or someone else. He found himself in an opulent cathedral, no longer as himself but as Uto, confronted by a man named Karnal seeking guidance. Karnal, displaying humility and reverence, revealed marks of valor and mastery on his back, impressing Uto. The experience was surreal for Arthur, feeling Uto's emotions and thoughts, witnessing a ceremony of honor and magic, all within the shadows of his own mind. As Arthur navigated this strange, shadowy communion with Uto's remnants, he couldn't help but wonder about the depth of power and history entwined within these obsidian horns. Arthur let out a muted sigh as the ceremonial scene unfolded before him, its gravity resonant in the weighty silence that followed his decree. Through your loyalty to the nation of Vikor, by excelling in the last battle against the nation of Seth's Klar, Uto, retainer of Kiros Vritra, grant your entry into the obsidian vault for a chance to earn an emblem, he proclaimed, his voice echoing off the grand cathedral walls. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, the intensity of their celebration stark against the solemnity of the moment. Karnal, the man kneeling before Arthur, allowed himself a single tear, a silent testament to the gravity of the honor bestowed upon him. Rising to his feet, he met Arthur's gaze with a resolute expression, his right fist over his heart and his left palm covering his sternum in a salute steeped in tradition. For the glory of Vekor and Elakria, for the Vritra. Echoes of the salute thundered back from the assembled crowd, their voices unified in fervent loyalty. As the scene blurred and shifted, Arthur found himself abruptly back in his room, the dreamlike memory dissipating as he was jerked to the present. An umbral haze seeped from the horn he held, a dark mist being drawn into the aclarite embedded in the center of his palm. Reacting instinctively, Arthur dropped the horn, distancing himself from its ancient power. Inspecting his mana core, he found no enhancement, a frustrating outcome as the mana had instead been absorbed by the aclarite. Despite Ren Kane's warnings about the gem's adaptive capabilities, Arthur hadn't anticipated it would draw power so aggressively from Uto's horn. Resolved yet uneasy, Arthur turned his thoughts to Sylvie, still diligently extracting mana from her own horn. To his surprise, the night had passed, dawn creeping up on them unnoticed. The implications of the memory lingered, thick with unspoken questions and enigmas of a bygone era. Terms like mark, crest, and emblem, though familiar in a general sense, hinted at deeper, more significant meanings in the context of Udo's memory. The obsidian vault, while sounding like a relic from a tale of dark fantasy, represented something of profound importance to Karnal, and presumably to others of his rank and station. Arthur's mind raced with the political intrigue of Vichor and Set's Klar, nations within the continent of Alakria, their conflicts perhaps a shadow play of larger powers and alliances within this world. Shaking off the cascade of thoughts, Arthur's attention was pulled away by a precise series of knocks at his door. Alanis Emeria, his training attendant, awaited him, her presence a reminder of the day's duties and the practicalities of his training needs. Accepting the shift from nocturnal mysteries to daylight responsibilities, Arthur prepared for the training grounds, his interaction with Sylvie set aside for the moment. On his way, he encountered Emily Watskin, nearly obscured behind a cumbersome box. Swiftly lending a hand, Arthur took the box, lightening her load, his leadership extending beyond the battlefield into these small acts of kindness. As Emily introduced herself to Alanis and they discussed their collaborative efforts for his training, Arthur felt a mild relief from the night's heavier revelations. The upcoming session promised not just physical training, but also a testing of new magical artifacts, a welcome distraction, and perhaps a necessary grounding after a night steeped in otherworldly visions and arcane secrets.